On the 1st of April 2024, 17-year-old Janayo Lucima was shot dead on his doorstep by fellow 17-year-old Mohammed Mansoray. The murder took place after 22-year-old Kuda Al-Kurdi lured Lucima out of his home in Barons Court. Lucima died as a result of a single bullet to the chest. In 2021, Lucima did time for helping to dismember someone. The person happened to be a musician. That, however, had nothing to do with his murder. It was a drugs murder. They killed Lucima because they saw him as a rival drug dealer. And there were no fewer than 6 people involved in the murder, all of whom have been banged up for life and soon to reveal their minimum terms. Mansoray knew exactly what was planned and willingly took on the role of gunman. In the minutes before he shot Mr. Lucima dead, he was happily displaying the gun to his co-defendants who had gone to the scene with him to provide support and encouragement. All the others had large, dangerous knives with them and were prepared to use them if the need arose because they were determined to make sure that Mr. Lucima was killed. On the 5th of September 2025 at the Old Bailey, Mohammed Mansoray, who by then was 18, got 27 years as his minimum term. Kuda Al-Kurdi, who was 22, he got 33 years as his minimum term. Mukhtar Saeed, who was 24, got 29 years. Issa Siteri, who was 19, got 28 years, and Yusuf Abdi, who was 19, got 28 and a half years. There was the 6th defendant. Because he's under 18, namely 17, he can't be named. He got 22 years. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the video so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready, and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. On the 29th of June 2023, in response to a piece of music, Lorik Lupke, Jason Furtado, Abel Chunda, Xavier Popon and Eden Clark murdered 2 young men and seriously attacked a third one. Their 2 victims who died were 23-year-old Klevi Shekaj, sorry if I mispronounced his name, and 15-year-old Leandro Reid. On the date said, Lorik Lupke learned that a music video was being filmed on the Elthorne estate in Islington, North London. That is clear from an exchange of messages with his girlfriend in which he said that there were ops present, by which he meant members of a rival gang. This led to a call being made to Jason Furtado, who assisted in making the arrangements for what then happened. The telephone evidence shows the extent of the assistance that Mr. Furtado provided, including being present when the taxi that he organised arrived to pick up Abel Chunda, Xavier Popon and Eden Clark and take them to the Elthorne estate, where there were a large number of young men present. The perpetrators all went dressed in dark, they had their faces covered, and they of course had with them their weapons, machetes. So when they got to the estate where all those young men were standing around, Abel Chunda, Xavier Popon and Eden Clark set about those young men with their machetes. The wounds that they inflicted were so serious that 2 of the victims, the ones that I've named, died, and the 3rd victim required urgent medical assistance. They then quickly left the scene in the taxi that they had kept waiting for them. That 3rd victim who actually survived, his name is Mr. Abdullahi, he actually came to court to testify in the trial against those 5 men, but he was terrified and was really reluctant to give evidence. With the exception of Xavier Popon, all the perpetrators had substantial criminal histories. Lorik Lupke had 18 previous convictions for 33 offences. Those offences include dishonesty, drugs, possession of weapons and knives in a public place, and offences of violence. And in addition, he committed the murders while he was on a suspended sentence and while he was also on bail in relation to other proceedings. He actually scarpered, but he was found and brought back to face trial. Jason Furtado had 9 previous convictions for 27 offences, including dishonesty and drugs. Abel Chunda had 46 previous convictions for 97 offences, including dishonesty, drugs, violence, robbery, weapons. And on the point of weapons, he had a conviction for having an unauthorised weapon in prison. As for Xavier Popon's criminal history, on the 29th of September 2023, police caught him in Essex Road in Islington selling drugs. He had on him cocaine, heroin and cannabis, as well as a bladed article. And then when on the 7th of November 2023, police searched his home, they found crack cocaine and diamorphine, as well as paraphernalia associated with drug dealing, including an electronic weighing scale. On the 27th of November 2023, Popon committed further offences of possession of a bladed article and possession of cannabis. Xavier Popon is 22 and so is Lorik Lukpi. Jason Furtado is 28, Abel Chunda is 29 and Eden Clark is 31. On the 26th of September 2025 at the Old Bailey, all five were sentenced to life with the following minimum terms. Lorik Lukpi, 39 years. Chunda and Clark, 38 years, and those two in addition got 25 years for attempted murder. Furtado and Popon each received 37 years as their minimum term. Reuben Higgins was only 17 when, in October 2024, he was murdered in Marston Green, Solihull in the West Midlands by 4 other teenagers. As at the time of this recording, only one of those 4 is old enough to be named, and his name is Abdurrahman Summers. On the evening of the 29th of October 2024, Reuben was in Marston Green together with 3 of his friends. By coincidence, the 3 perpetrators, together with a 4th man named Mass, were also there. The 2 groups didn't know one another and they had no contact with one another until about 6:15 p.m. At 6:15 p.m, the perpetrators group approached Reuben's group and spoke to them. At first, that was all friendly, but then Mass suggested that he recognised Reuben as someone who had previously pulled a knife on him. There is no evidence to suggest that that had actually happened, and when Mass asked Reuben to go around the corner with him, Reuben refused. The man was unarmed, he didn't want any trouble, and he was backing away in an effort to avoid confrontation. Mass, however, then reached for a distinctive knife in his waistband. As he did that, the 3 perpetrators were moving forwards and 2 witnesses gave evidence that they reached for their waistbands. Reuben and his friends all fled, but went in different directions. Reuben ran a short distance up the main road and sought refuge in a shop called the Vape Mini Market. He was pursued, however, by Mass and by the other 3 perpetrators. Reuben sought to keep the door of the shop closed by lying down in front of it, whereupon the chasing group attacked the door in an effort to force it open. In court, the jury heard from a witness who was working in the shop, whose name is Farhan Taha. He told them that he saw 3 or 4 people punching, kicking and pushing at the door. He described the group as shouting, swearing and being very aggressive. He told the jury that they all pushed together and forced the door open, and then all 4 of those outside came in. So the door opened inwards, pushing Reuben into a corner which was partly covered by the shop CCTV. Mr. Taha told the jury that Reuben was picked up off the floor and then attacked. He described seeing people making stabbing motions towards him, but didn't actually see any knives. The attack lasted no more than 10 seconds, but in that time, Reuben was stabbed 4 times by at least 2 knives. Mr. Taha believes that all of those that entered his shop were involved in stabbing Reuben, but a perpetrator coded COH and Abdurrahman Summers weren't captured by the CCTV in circumstances where they probably would have been if they had actively been stabbing Reuben. But unluckily for them, that does not in any way reduce their liability. They've got joint liability, even if they didn't physically perform the act of stabbing and murdering Reuben. Mr. Taha described one of the other perpetrators, who's coded as SER, as being the most aggressive of the attackers, and that is borne out by the CCTV, which shows the man, or the youth rather, was only a teenager, assaulting Reuben, and while he was doing so, Mass was standing behind him. Having been stabbed, Reuben fell to the floor, where he was kicked all over his body. The attacking group then fled, and the external CCTV captured COH leaving the shop at the end of the attack. The attacking group then fled, but SER returned within minutes because he realised that he had dropped his phone. He re-entered the shop and asked Mr. Taha where his phone was. As he did that, Reuben was lying on the ground, obviously seriously injured. SER completely ignored Reuben, and when Mr. Taha told him that he didn't know where his phone was, he just turned and walked out. One of the stabbing injuries inflicted upon Reuben went into his chest to a depth of 6 centimetres. That wound penetrated his heart, causing rapid blood loss and eventually cardiac arrest. Members of the public and then paramedics sought to assist Reuben, but it was to no avail, and Reuben was declared dead just after 7 p.m. The perpetrators were arrested over the next 8 days. Prior to his arrest, Abdurrahman Summers travelled to London and unsuccessfully tried to buy a flight to Spain. He was able to buy a bus ticket to Madrid, but ultimately he didn't go, and instead he went back to Birmingham. Mas fled to Pakistan, and to this day, or rather up to and including the time of this recording, he still hasn't been caught. The 4 factors that aggravated the sentence given to SER include, firstly, that even though he didn't deliver the fatal blow to Reuben, he played a leading role in what was a group attack. Secondly, when he returned to the vape shop, he stole Reuben's phone. Thirdly, when he committed his horrendous acts against Reuben, he was on police bail. Fourthly, in December 2024, he was sentenced for an offence of theft. That was the offence for which he was on police bail when he helped kill Reuben. That offence involved him stealing a phone from a schoolboy in circumstances where one of his group was in possession of a knife. This was an offence which came close to amounting to robbery, and the victim was a child. Where COH is concerned, there were 3 aggravating factors to his sentence. Number 1, in 2023, when he was 13 or 14, he committed no fewer than 10 robberies and or attempted robberies. Altogether, there were 10 offences. He committed most of those robberies or attempted robberies together with others. He likes his group crimes, and several of those robberies or attempted robberies involved either the production or mention of a knife. On at least one occasion, he was in possession of a knife himself. Secondly, at the time of the murder, he, like SER, was on bail. And thirdly, he was subject to 2 conditional discharges and a referral order at the time when he killed or helped to kill Reuben. And there were 2 aggravating features in the sentence given to Abdurrahman Summers. Firstly, he committed 6 offences of robbery and an offence of possessing a knife between 2020 and 2022. Most of those offences were committed as part of a group. Several of them involved a knife being mentioned or shown to the victim, and on one occasion he was in possession of a knife himself. He was only aged between 14 and 16 when he committed those crimes, but they nonetheless show a pattern of using weapons to threaten violence, and they make his position more serious. Secondly, he was convicted of the last of those robberies in April 2023 and sentenced to 3 years in a young offenders institution. He was out on licence following his release from that sentence, and at the time that he took part in Reuben's murder, clearly he didn't give a toss about the fact that he was on licence. At the time of Reuben's murder, Sir and Co were both 15, while Summers was 18. Sir and Co came from very chaotic and abusive backgrounds, including disrupted schooling, some child exploitation going on there. S has a really serious illness called Marfan syndrome. It affects his blood, and he's going to need lots of hospital treatment, or at least clinical treatment, while he's in custody on an ongoing basis. I'm quoting these things to show you the mitigating factors that the judge had to take into account when he sentenced the 3 perpetrators. As to what they actually got, their sentencing having come on the 15th of September 2025 at Birmingham Crown Court, S got 17 years, C got 15 years, and Summers got 19 years. These are all the minimum length of time that they have to spend in prison because they've all got life sentences. If and when they're ever released, they'll be on licence for life. When the judge sentenced 46-year-old Daniel Whybrow, who comes from Canning Town, East London, for the murder of his 50-year-old neighbour Raish Ahmed and for wounding with intent of Raish Ahmed's 16-year-old son, he said that Whybrow had been anything but a good neighbour. He complained about the behaviour of others and he was extremely territorial and aggressive towards his neighbours. On the 5th of October 2024, Whybrow was working on a bike in a small grassy area near the bins outside the block of flats. He had wedged open the door with a child's toy so he could easily come and go to his ground floor flat. Mr Ahmed left his flat, which was also on the ground floor, to go to the gym about 4 p.m. It seems Mr Ahmed spoke to Whybrow about the fact that the door had been left open because he was quite reasonably concerned about his family's safety. It's clear that Whybrow took violent exception to this and made threats towards him that caused him to leave in a state of fear. Raish arranged to meet a friend of his, Mohammed Hassan, outside the block and returned at about 4:30 p.m, by which time Mr Hassan was outside wearing a dressing gown. There was a heated argument between Whybrow and the two men, Mr Hassan and Raish Ahmed, which developed into a violent struggle. At some point, Raish Ahmed's son, who we'll call John, came out of the flats to join his father. It seemed likely that Mr Hassan moved to the front door and removed the child's toy so that the door would close, and shortly afterwards a fight broke out between him and Whybrow. It may also be that Mr Ahmed had a wheel lock at this stage which he attempted to use in the course of this struggle. While Whybrow was fighting the two men, he referred to them as bloody Asians. After a few seconds, the struggle moved towards the window to the kitchen of the ground floor flat, which was also close to the bins, and the ground floor flat belonged to Whybrow. At this point, Whybrow leant through the open window of his home and grabbed a knife which was kept on a block by the window. Once he was armed with the knife, the three men immediately retreated. In other words, Mr Ahmed, Mr Hassan and John, that's what I'm calling Mr Ahmed's son. However, Mr Ahmed unfortunately fell on his back near the bins, either because Whybrow hit him across the nose or because he just tripped up. As was shown vividly on CCTV from a camera in a first floor flat and on footage taken by an onlooker on his phone, Whybrow then proceeded to stab Mr Ahmed repeatedly and violently while he was prone on the ground, trying to defend himself in vain by kicking and waving the wheel lock. In the course of the attack, Whybrow succeeded in stabbing him in the chest and to the right upper thigh. The chest wound went to a depth of 7 centimetres and required severe force, but didn't cause any damage to any internal organ and wouldn't have been fatal. The thigh wound would have only involved moderate force, but it severed the right superficial femoral artery. The effect of such an injury is that there is severe bleeding and that unless appropriate medical care is obtained very quickly, that is a fatal injury. Mr Ahmed managed to walk a few paces to the garden of number 43 where he collapsed. Although the emergency services did all that they could, the man never regained consciousness and he died in hospital 2 days later. At some point of the attack, John, Mr Ahmed's son, tried to intervene with his bare hands. Whybrow attempted to stab John to the face and to the head, but John was able to defend himself by holding up his arms, and in doing so he got 2 cuts to his arm. He now has scars to the arm and, far more importantly, scars to his emotions, his psychological well-being, and that's what he expressed in his victim impact statement. On the 3rd of September 2025 at Snaresbrook Crown Court, Whybrow got life with a minimum term of 24 years. Direece Roche is exactly why, one might argue, a murderer should always be given a forever prison sentence, otherwise known as a whole life order. After getting out of prison for committing one murder, you see, the man went and committed another murder. Roche committed his first murder when he was 16. He and his brother Owen went round to the home of Adam Steele in Salford in Manchester, northwest England. The occasion was New Year's Day. They went round to try to find Owen's girlfriend. There'd been some struggles and tensions between Owen and his girlfriend, and when the brothers turned up to Adam Steele's flat, they demanded to know where the girl or woman was at. That caused an argument that erupted into the street, and Direece Roche, for whatever reason, got out a knife and stabbed Adam Steele to death with it. For that murder, Roche got a life sentence with a minimum of 12 years. His brother, meanwhile, got an indeterminate sentence for manslaughter. 8 years after Roche was sent down, his legal team tried to get him out early. They said he was a reformed character, he had an excellent prison record, and he had raised money for charity. He had cut ties with all his criminal friends, and he was planning on enrolling for a psychology degree. There's no doubt that the judges were very impressed with the progress that Roche had made in prison, but they ultimately refused him early release because they just weren't convinced that he was fully reformed, fully rehabilitated. And we can see now that their scepticism was fully justified. For instance, on day release from HMP Kirkham in Lancashire in May 2023, Roche was found with a lock knife in his bag. He denied knowing anything about it, but in any case, he was released from prison that same year, September 2023. So off Roche went out of prison. Freedom was his again, although he is on licence, or rather was on licence forever, because when you get a life sentence, which you always get for murder, you do whatever your minimum term is, and then when you get out, you're on licence for the rest of your life, which means that you have to live by a strict set of rules, and if you break any of those rules, you can be sent back to prison for any length of time. Knowing that he had his licence hanging over him for the rest of his life, 9 months later, Roche went and murdered his great uncle, Fintan McDwyer. A father and a grandfather, Fintan McDwyer was 64. He lost his wife back in 2005. By the time of his murder, he was retired, and one of his favourite hobbies was taking his beloved dog Sammy for daily walks in his local park. When Direece Roche was little, he knew his great uncle. They would see each other regularly enough, but as Roche got older, his uncle, for whatever reason, fell out of his life. And another important point about Roche is that 3 years before he murdered Adam Steele, which, sorry for not saying this earlier, he did in 2011, he lost his mother. Her name was Samantha Toohey, and she committed suicide in 2008. In the note that she left behind, she said that when she was little, she was essayed by one of her uncles. Fintan McDwyer was one of her uncles, but the fact is, Samantha had 12 other uncles, and she didn't say which one it was, if it was any. Sorry, maybe she was essayed, maybe she wasn't. I personally don't know. So there was no evidence that it was Fintan McDwyer, and after Fintan's murder, the police looked into whether it could have been him, and they couldn't find any evidence to say that it was. So now we're all probably wondering, did Roche believe that that particular great uncle of his, Fintan McDwyer, was the one who had essayed his mother? And if so, was that why he decided to kill his great uncle? Just before killing his great uncle, Roche actually went to visit his mother's grave. She is buried in Southern Cemetery in Chorlton, and then, just a few hours after murdering his great uncle, he went back to her grave again. On the day that Roche murdered his great uncle Fintan was home alone, except for his dog Sammy. His son Ryan, you see, had gone away to a wedding with his girlfriend. Late at night on the 29th of June 2024, Roche put on a balaclava and other dark clothing. He left his home in Longside and went on foot to the home of his great uncle. He went through people's gardens, and when he got to his great uncle's home, he tried to open a ground floor window to get in. He wasn't able to do so, but then he found a ladder in a nearby garden, and he used it to climb up to his uncle's bedroom window, and he got in that way. And then in a matter of about 90 seconds, he stabbed his great uncle to death, and he stabbed him 77 times. Fintan's body was only discovered 2 days later when his son Ryan came home. Police arrested Roche in his home on the 6th of July. it was easy for them to find him because they found DNA on objects that were left near the home of Fintan McDwyer, including some blood that was smeared on a fence, because remember, he'd got into his great uncle's home by climbing through gardens of neighbouring houses. And remember, because Roche is a convicted murderer with a criminal record, his DNA was in the police database. In his police interviews, he told them that he himself, as a child, had been essayed by his great uncle Fintan McDwyer. It turns out, though, that that was the first time he had ever mentioned the matter to anybody. And he said that the reason for that was because beforehand he was too scared to talk about it. Roche also claimed that his great uncle had told him that his dog Sammy was named after his mother, Samantha Toohey. He said that that link disturbed him and that he decided that he had to steal the dog. Somehow that would stop the idea of the dog being named after his mother disturbing him. And we're all thinking, oh, you went to steal a dog, so you took a great big knife with you. Don't know how big the knife is, but you get the point. But the thing is, Roche denied that he actually owned the knife. He denied he'd carried it with him. He said rather that the knife was his great uncle's and that he had had to wrestle it away from his great uncle. That obviously implies that his great uncle was the one who attacked him. Funnily enough, the court didn't quite believe him, especially considering that Roche had stabbed his uncle 77 times. That is not self-defence. That's a furious, frenzied, ferocious act of murder. On the 19th of September 2025, he was told that he would spend the rest of his life in prison because he was given a whole life order. After being an extremely abusive partner to his girlfriend, 25-year-old Caitlin Cleary, on the 20th of January 2025, 25-year-old Jacob Clark, who comes from Luton, just north of London, murdered 46-year-old Diane Cleary, the mother of his ex-partner. Although Jacob had been in a relationship with Caitlin Cleary since 2016, by 2017-2018 at the latest, their relationship had started to break down because of Jacob's abusive behaviour. In addition, for a year and a half of that relationship, Jacob and Caitlin lived in the home of Caitlin's mother, Diane, and arguments between Jacob and Diane were an everyday feature. Not long after Caitlin gave birth to the daughter that she had with Jacob, which happened in 2020, because of the constant arguing and aggression that Diane was getting from Jacob, she told him to get out of her home once and for all. And in response to that, both he and Caitlin went and moved into a maisonette in Turner's Road in July 2020. Jacob was spiteful, violent and manipulative towards his girlfriend Caitlin. Emotional blackmail was one of the weapons in his armoury that he regularly deployed against Caitlin in order to keep her with him. But by the 16th of January 2025, enough was enough, and further abusive behaviour by Jacob towards Caitlin and their children made her leave the family home with them and move back in with her mother. Caitlin made it clear that the relationship was at an end and, in a perfectly reasonable way, told Jacob to get out of the home by the 20th of January so that she could move back in there with their kids. In addition, on the 19th of January, when Caitlin went round to the home to collect some stuff for her kids, she went with a family associate, let's just say, who again told Jacob directly to his face that he needed to be gone by the next day. That associate, as I've called the person, is Tycee Gallagher, quite a well-known boxer in Luton, who has a child who is a grandchild of Diane Cleary. The day after, Monday the 20th, when the children were at school, at 10:23 a.m. approximately, Caitlin and Diane went over to the maisonette and sure enough, Jacob was still there. Diane was making clear that Caitlin's decision to end the relationship and the need for him to move out of the house were final. And Caitlin was speaking to Jacob in a perfectly decent and calm way, according to the research that I've done. And then 10 minutes after that, Jacob indeed left the flat, but he made comments implying that he would take his life as a form of emotional blackmail, which as I say, was his typical behaviour. He continued to make that same threat in messages and calls. And then he went back to the flat to get his e-bike, and still, once he was there, even though he was at the flat, he continued to call Caitlin, and he did that again after leaving with his bike. But then, not long after that, he came back, and following a very brief interaction directly with Diane, he confronted her on the threshold of the flat, and Caitlin saw him hitting her in the head and face multiple times with a brick, while blaming them both for what he was doing. Caitlin somehow managed to get the brick out of the man's hand, but that didn't stop him. He just went to the kitchen, came back with a knife or a pair of scissors. We're not sure which it was. Scissors do come into it though, as you'll soon see here. And he started stabbing Diane. And then he went to the kitchen again and got another weapon, another bladed weapon, and stabbed Diane in areas that Caitlin couldn't protect her from, because Caitlin was of course there and she was trying to get her mother away, shield her and make Jacob stop. But Jacob didn't stop. His attack on Diane was relentless, and eventually Diane collapsed in the same spot where Jacob had repeatedly attacked her, and she died not long after that. Before she died though, while she was lying collapsed in the flat, Jacob calmly turned to Caitlin, gave her a pair of scissors and told her to cut his hair. That is something he did to disguise himself, to make it more difficult for the police to catch him. And Caitlin was in an understandable state of shock, distress and fear, and she did what Jacob told her to do. And after she finished cutting his hair, he looked in the mirror, complimented his new cut, saying it looked nice, washed his hand and then left. And of course, in Caitlin's attempts to protect her mother, she too was stabbed. Thankfully, her injuries weren't life-threatening. It turns out that Jacob came from a background of abuse. That said, he actually had no prior convictions. The one good thing he did though was to plead guilty, because that meant there was no trial. All he had was a sentencing hearing. And sure enough, on the 5th of September 2025 at Luton Crown Court, he got life with a minimum of 25 years. 34-year-old Amy Pugh, who comes from Newport in Shropshire, West Midlands, is doing life for the murder of her estranged husband, 29-year-old Kyle Pugh, which unravelled in Amy's home on the 22nd of March 2022. Drugs and alcohol were the causes of the markedly abusive and tumultuous relationship that Pugh and Kyle once had, Pugh having maliciously burnt down, for instance, the workshop in their formerly shared home where Kyle, an MC and artist, used to create his work. In November 2024, the woman got a 19-month suspended sentence for that offence, which she committed on the 15th of October 2021. I can't say whether or not Kyle's documented history of self-harm and suicide attempts sprang from his relationship with Pugh, but one such history the man had. On the night of the 22nd of March 2022, Kyle, who, having since left Pugh, was expecting a baby with his new girlfriend at this point, was over at Pugh's home in Newport, visiting the children that he and Pugh shared. At some point, the estranged couple got into a violent argument over the very pregnancy of Kyle's girlfriend, which culminated in Pugh's overpowering her ex and then strangling him with vicious force. On realising that she had knocked her children's father out, Pugh only called 999 20 minutes later, choosing to first call her father several times before then. On the phone to the ambulance, the perpetrator told them that Kyle had hanged himself and insisted that she had tried to revive him by slapping him. In court, her act of calling out to her ex while on the phone to 999, quote, "Kyle, wake up! Why have you done this?" unquote, was dismissed as nothing more than an act intended, of course, to support the lies that she was telling. Although paramedics managed to revive Kyle, the man died in hospital the following day. A murder investigation was only launched by police after Kyle's family raised concerns around the circumstances of Kyle's death. During the investigation, officers discovered that Kyle had sent messages to family and friends throughout the day of the incident, making plans with them. One voice note that he had sent to one of his friends saying that he would see him later that night. After Pugh's conviction for Kyle's murder, her arrest for that offence having come on the 1st of April 2022, while her murder charge followed in November 2024, Detective Inspector Joe Delahaye remarked that Pugh, quote, used Kyle's mental health history to manipulate and lie to his loved ones as well as to authorities, all to protect herself, and through the whole investigation she has shown no remorse for her actions that day, unquote. On the 5th of September 2025 at Stafford Crown Court, Amy Pugh got life with a minimum term of 14 years. Paul Topham, a 46-year-old man from Birmingham in the West Midlands, battered to death a 94-year-old man for drug money. Topham attacked Harold Monk in the man's Wolverhampton home and caused him severe fractures to his face, skull, spine and ribs, the attack having unravelled in October 2024. Mr Monk died a day later in hospital, but thankfully, despite his injuries, he was able to tell police through an oxygen mask what had happened to him. Topham was convicted of murder in July at Wolverhampton Crown Court. The man is thought to have obtained a key fob and a flat key belonging to Mr Monk during a visit to his mother, who lived at the same sheltered housing scheme. Mr Monk was a great-grandfather, and he told detectives that he awoke in the early hours to see a male figure wearing black clothes and a face covering. He asked Topham what he was doing before Topham pushed him to the floor and then straddled him and launched a prolonged assault. Police were alerted by a neighbour who heard banging and groaning. Topham, who comes from Palmerston Road in Birmingham, told jurors that he had struggled with out-of-control drug addiction and had committed burglaries to feed his habit, and that he was off his face during his murderous attack on Mr Monk. The court heard that he had been smoking Black Mamba, don't know what that is, and drinking super-strength beer or cider all day. The court also heard Topham tell them that he was disgusted, ashamed and repulsed by the devastation that he's caused to Mr Monk's family. When he sentenced him, Judge Michael Chambers KC said that Mr Monk had lived a good life with many interests and achievements, and he lived relatively independently for his age and played a full part in the community. The family were looking forward to celebrating his 95th birthday, but instead of that, he died a violent death at a location where he should have felt safe. On the 11th of September 2025 at Wolverhampton Crown Court, Topham got life with a minimum of 33 years. The February 2024 murder of ex-prison officer Lenny Scott by repeat violent offender Elias Morgan was 4 years in the making. In the UK, we keep hearing about prison officers getting banged up themselves for things like bringing illicit substances into prisons and, even more notoriously, for shagging prison inmates. In March 2020, father of three Lenny Scott from Lancashire, North England, though, refused a £1,500 bribe from an inmate by the name of Elias Morgan at Outcourse Prison in Liverpool, North West England. The payment was to get Mr Scott to keep quiet about the phone that he had found in Morgan's possession and which he, Mr Scott, had duly confiscated. Picking up on my mention of prison officers getting locked up for having a sexual relationship with inmates, which is charged under the offence of misconduct in public office, or MIPO, Sarah Williams, a former prison officer at HMP Outcourse, is, as I record this, doing time for having had a sexual relationship with Elias Morgan, Morgan's phone having provided evidence of that. As you can now see, Morgan's attempt to silence Mr Scott over the phone wasn't simply to avoid punishment for being in possession of a phone, because prisoners aren't allowed to have phones. The man knew how serious the consequences of the discovery of his sexual liaisons with Sarah Williams could be. In handing the phone over to investigators, though, Mr Scott was acting in accordance, of course, with his professional duty. Born in either 1989 or 1990, Morgan had once taken part in an £83,000 bank robbery in which staff were threatened with machetes. He also had convictions for theft, conspiracy to rob, drugs offences and for causing serious injury by dangerous driving. Having been released in 2022, when he executed Mr. Scott, as he did on the 8th of February 2024, he was 11 days away from his trial relating to his sexual interactions with a prison officer. Morgan perpetrated Mr. Scott's execution, moreover, exactly as he had threatened to, the man having told Mr. Scott that for passing the phone on to investigators, he would kill him, but that he would bide his time. These threats having been accompanied with a gun gesture of his. He did a two-finger pointing thing, the way that kids do. At the time of the shooting, Mr. Scott himself, who was then aged 33, was no longer working as a prison officer. In response to an incident from 2021, you see, which involved the restraint of another prisoner, he was sacked, and sorry, but I couldn't trace any further details to the matter. Now, whatever that might make us think of Mr. Scott, can we please keep in mind that he was innocent and that Morgan had no right to do what he did to him. So, on the 8th of February 2024, 4 whole years after he first threatened to kill Mr. Scott, which was in line with his intention to wait a while before getting his own back on Mr. Scott by murdering him, Morgan waited for 53 minutes outside the gym on Peel Road in Skelmersdale for Mr. Scott to leave his jiu-jitsu practice. At 7:35 p.m, the moment when Mr. Scott duly emerged from the gym, Morgan, who, for reasons that I'm about to share, was wearing a high-vis orange jacket, walked up to him, pointed his self-loading handgun at him, and shot him all of 6 times at close range. Mr. Scott dropped dead. Morgan, meanwhile, promptly took flight in a van that had been left nearby the previous evening by his close friend Anthony Klevi, aged 29. Anthony's story is coming up. The preparation that Morgan did both for the murder and for the subsequent cover-up revealed the extent of the man's careful planning and premeditation. The preparation included the discovery of Mr. Scott's movement. The man literally stalked Mr. Scott, where Mr. Scott lived with his partner and his 3 very young children, the gym that he used in Skelmersdale, plus a recce drive by Morgan to the said places a month before the shooting.
Hello, Miss, hi, please.
Hi, I'm an officer at HMPL course. I've just been informed that there's been a car set outside my house all weekend by a prisoner, and I believe it's there at the moment.
Is there anyone at home who can confirm it?
Confirm which, sorry?
That the car's outside.
Well, they're not aware, because I don't really want to alarm them, because
You're going to have to get someone to look out to see if there's a car.
Okay, well, they're not going to sit directly outside it because it's a prisoner threatening my family.
Right, okay, so what's your name, please?
Lenny Scott.
Is that Lenny Scott?
Yeah.
Lenny, what's your date of birth, love?
15th of the 10th, 1990.
And who's made the threat?
Elias Morgan. He's described my family and me to a T. Described my house. He said he's had them there, just ready for because it's over. I've nicked them for a phone.
Ah, right.
And
okay.
he's until I dropped that, he said to stay in there, and they're just going to constantly be around my house and.
Right. Okay.
Just in fear for my family's life. That's all.
Okay. And has he described the vehicle at all?
No, he hasn't. He said he's got lads everywhere, so he says he's described my vehicle and he's described my house and what my girlfriend and twin boys look like.
Is there any way that, like, he's excuse my French, but is he chatting over this?
No, I believe this would be. Yeah, it's too specific because my twins, they're twins, but they've got different colour hair.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit. He's got everything to a T. He knows. He's described me everything. Yeah, an iPhone he had. So, and he reckons it's going to incriminate him. So that's why he's going to these lengths.
Right. When was this?
That was Friday. He said he's had people sat outside all weekend.
Has anyone reported anything to you, like your family, or have you noticed anyone?
Recently a couple over the road, I believe they're dealing anyway,
right.
Has moved in, so I've just assumed any car that was there or hovering was to do with them.
So he's described your house, yeah?
Yeah, my vehicle.
Are your family at home at the moment?
Yeah. I don't know what's best, whether to tell her or... Sorry if you think I'm wasting time.
No, no, you're really not.
Yeah.
So at home, is it your partner or your wife?
Wife. No, partner.
What's her name, please?
Lucy Griffiths.
And kids, the twins? Is it just the twins?
Yeah.
And is this your mobile? No, it's not.
I've rang from the jail, sorry.
Do you know what? I'd be tempted just to carry on so they don't see you going home. Is there any chance you can then get your girlfriend to meet with you? Does she drive?
She doesn't drive, no.
She doesn't drive? All right.
No.
In that case, you would have to go home, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not... personally, it's not... I can deal with whatever. I'm fine with that. It's them.
Is he from Merseyside?
Yeah, I think Speak.
As soon as the next available car will get deployed, we'll ask them to ring you rather than have a patrol and go to your house.
Yeah.
Because obviously we don't know how you're going to play it with your missus, and also we don't want to alert them that you've contacted us. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, love. It's log 217, like I said. If you just try and bear with us on that, and we'll get the next available patrol to make contact with yourself.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Bye, love.
Morgan also obtained an e-bike, which was carried in the van that his friend Anthony, as I just mentioned, dropped off for him in Daybrook the night before the shooting. Daybrook is just a few minutes away from the gym in Peel Road where Mr. Scott was gunned down. Morgan used another vehicle to travel from Liverpool to Skelmersdale. It was a Mercedes GLC which was registered to his mother. He got to Skelmersdale around an hour before the shooting, because remember I said he waited for Mr. Scott for 53 minutes. However, he parked a short distance away from the gym in order, of course, to avoid suspicion. The e-bike, meanwhile, was used by Morgan to travel quietly to and from the scene in a rehearsal of the route for the shooting. Morgan wore the said high-vis orange jacket so that after the shooting he could remove it and make it harder for him to be identified as the shooter. The van, the bike and the gun have never to this day been recovered, Morgan having disposed of those things with utmost efficiency. So how did Morgan get caught then? A few days after murdering Mr. Scott, he returned to Skelmersdale and changed the number plate of the Mercedes that he had used to get to the town on the night of the murder, and then he moved the vehicle to another location. He subsequently repeated those two steps twice more in an effort, as is obvious I'd say, to throw police off the scent of the car. The perpetrator even went to the extent of removing the SOS unit from the car, sorry but I don't know what that is, fearing as he did that its manufacturer's SIM card might provide data of the vehicle's movement. Unluckily for Morgan, however, he didn't know that there was another manufacturer's SIM card which provided the telematics data that the police needed, and that's how the man got caught. When he was subsequently arrested, Morgan went no comment in each of his police interviews.
These officers will speak to you and explain what's going on. Everything's on camera, it's just...
Right, Elias.
That's room 3, 1 second. That's room.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Do you want to open that room for us?
Sorry, can I use the room?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go on, secure your rating for us.
Yeah. Elias, it's 11 o'clock, mate. You're under arrest on suspicion of murder, right? Yeah. You don't have to say anything, but in my army's defence, if you don't mention one question, something which you later find in court. Yeah. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand? No reply? Alright, reason for that, mate. Prompt and effective investigation, mate. Alright, so we can interview you over the matter. Alright? Just that way for us? We've got bills on underneath me, yeah?
No, don't wear bills then.
You haven't?
No.
What have you got here?
Money.
How much is that?
No more than 250. 290. 290.
Can you go around your waistband, mate? Yeah. Right. Spin that for us. And again.
As for his friend Anthony, after initially being charged with Mr. Scott's murder alongside Morgan, Anthony was cleared of that charge in court after convincing the jury that he had no knowledge that the e-bike and the van that he had been in charge of were being used in a murder. He also betrayed Morgan with his courtroom testimony that rather than having been, quote, seeing a man about a dog, unquote, in Liverpool at the time of the shooting, as Morgan had claimed, the perpetrator had called him that night to say that he had, quote, done someone in Skem, unquote, and that Anthony should get rid of his phone. Lenny Scott is sorely missed, not just by his 3 little kids, but also by many others.
The murder of the deceased has caused profound grief to the deceased's family, his young children, and to all who knew him. He was 33 years old, with much of his life ahead of him. He was loved, respected, and made his family proud. The attempts by you during the trial to blacken his character have been rejected by the jury. In the victim's personal statements, this court has heard the very moving statements from his mother, Paula Scott, his father, Neil Scott, and his former partners, Lucy Carnhill and Lucy Griffiths, the mother of his children, who must all bear their suffering for the rest of their lives.
On the 2nd of September 2025 at Preston Crown Court, Morgan got life with a minimum term of, wait for it, 45 years. This is way longer than the typical sentence for murder here in the UK, and with good reason.
In addition to the very significant degree of planning, is that this was a revenge killing of the deceased for what he did lawfully as part of his duty as a serving prison officer. There is an important public interest in making the killing of prison and police officers in the course of their duty exceptionally serious. This is expressly reflected within Schedule 21 of the Sentencing Act 2020. Whilst the deceased was not acting in the course of his duty when he was murdered, because he was no longer a prison officer, the killing was carried out because of what he lawfully did when he was acting in the course of his duty. It was revenge threatened by you when the deceased was a prison officer. The public interest in making the murder of former prison and police officers for their lawful actions whilst serving officers must require, in my judgment, sentencing on the basis that it is of particular seriousness to a very high degree.
Taking away the 15 months that he'd already served on remand before his murder trial, Morgan will be around 79 before he becomes eligible to apply for parole. Another big news story that broke on the 23rd of September 2025 was the sentencing of 2 men for the murders of 2 young men that took place on the M3 motorway in Surrey, South East England, on the 22nd of July 2024. The 2 murderers are Alex Rose and Charles Pardoe. On the night in question, Alex Rose thought that his home was being targeted by a group of young men who were apparently trespassing in the grounds of St Paul's School behind his house. His business premises had been burgled earlier the year before, and when nobody was arrested, he told the police that he was investigating it himself. So on seeing these guys on the grounds of the school near to where his business premises were, Alex Rose got his mate Charles Pardoe to come with him to look for the guys on foot, and then they got into Rose's pickup truck to continue their search. When the 2 saw William Burchard and Darren George, those 2 men, by the way, were aged 21 and 22 respectively, they saw the 2 men on William Burchard's e-bike. They just got it into their mind that those 2 men were the culprits. Those were the men that they'd seen on the grounds of the school near to Rose's business premises. And then what they did was to chase those 2 young men, both called William. I'll call them, sorry, they weren't both called William. William Burchard and Darren George, I'm going to call them William and Darren. Chased them quite literally to their deaths. In truth, however, William and Darren had nothing whatsoever to do with trespassing that had taken place near to Rose's business premises. they weren't the ones who were trespassing. They were travelling in no particular hurry until they saw Pardoe and Rose, and they didn't know their names, but they saw a car with two men in it behind them coming up to them at speed, and that caused the two men to speed up to try to get away from them, which caused their bike to veer across the wrong side of the road at one point. But Rose and Pardoe continued to pursue them at speeds of around twice the speed limit, all the way to the Sunbury Cross roundabout, where William tried in vain to escape from the two guys chasing them by navigating the roundabout the wrong way. However, Rose and Pardoe followed very closely behind them the wrong way onto the slip road as William rode across it with Darren, and they were going against the intended flow of traffic until Pardoe and Rose caught up with them and deliberately drove into the rear of the e-bike, which caused both young men to be thrown off it with the force of the collision. William Burchard died immediately, having suffered multiple fractures, abrasions and skin loss to his face, head, body and limbs, indicating a severe degree of force had been applied to the front of his head, which caused fatal injuries to the front and back of his brain. Darren suffered an accelerating fall as well as multiple fractures, and he also suffered, like William, abrasions to his head, face and also to his torso and limbs. He sustained a catastrophic brain injury from which it was almost inevitable that he wouldn't survive, but he was alive at the point when he was taken to hospital, but once he got there he was pronounced dead. The two men must have been utterly terrified in their final moments. It was just so unexpected and so undeserved. So what the two men did afterwards speaks volumes about the weak characters that they both evidently are. This is what the judge said, but you know, who would argue with the judge on this point? Because the point is that neither of them did anything to see if either young man could be helped. They didn't stop, they didn't get out, they didn't check on them, they didn't call for an ambulance, and neither of Alex Rose or Charles Pardoe has at any time since demonstrated even a shred of remorse for what they did to these wholly two innocent men. And frankly, even if the people that they murdered had been the ones who'd been trespassing, you don't get the death penalty for trespassing, you don't get the death penalty for burglary. What the two men did do after they killed the two young men that they'd chased to their death was that Rose drove back near to his home, which is where Charles Pardoe's own car was parked. Pardoe then got into his van and drove away, and in driving away he went past the collision site where again he had the opportunity to stop and check on the two young men, but he didn't do so because the two young men were still there lying motionless in the road. The emergency services had been called by a lovely man called Mr. Singh, clearly a decent, public-spirited person, a brave person, and Mr. Singh also made sure that the two men who, you know, he didn't know whether they were dead or, you know, had a chance of recovering, surviving, made sure they were safe from other vehicles driving in their direction. The next 20 hours were consumed by Alex Rose doing everything in his power to evade justice. He falsely reported the vehicle that he had just used to commit the double murder to the police as stolen, and he did so after parking it away from his house and going home on foot.
Sorry, police, how can I help?
Hello, I need to report a theft of a vehicle.
Okay, someone's taken your vehicle?
Yeah.
Okay, what's happened?
I came back, parked the vehicle up, and then I woke up this morning and left early doors, and then it was early this morning, but I didn't think to look this morning. I was in a rush and come back and realised that it's not there. So yes, outside. Yeah. Alex.
Your surname?
Rose.
Theft of motor vehicle. Were the keys taken?
Yeah.
Yes. So where were the keys?
I've not looked for my spare set, but I know that the ones that I had are not there. They were left on the table.
Inside your home?
Inside, yeah.
Wait, so was this a burglary then?
Well, they've taken the car, so I don't know what it comes under.
So have they come into your home and taken the keys?
Yeah, they must have, yes, because the keys were in the house.
And you definitely can't find the keys anywhere?
No, I haven't solidly looked everywhere, but from where I know I left them, they're definitely not there. And no one in the house would have touched them. There's only one other person who lives in the house.
Okay, so essentially then we're looking at a burglary as opposed to someone has come into your home and then taken it. Is that what you are under the impression?
Yeah.
Someone has come into your home and taken the keys?
Yeah.
Okay, are you going to be home for the rest of the day?
No, not at the moment. I'm at
There's
work
a
at the
burglary.
moment.
We're going to have to send some officers. This is a burglary.
Okay.
Okay, so the last time you saw the car was what, yesterday? So it was what time did you return home last night with the car? Was it yesterday?
I came home maybe... got there about 9. I got home maybe... I couldn't tell you the exact time. Maybe after 9 o'clock. Half 9. Just before 10, 9:45ish, something like that.
Okay, so yesterday at about 10ish. And then what time did you notice that the car was missing today?
Not long ago, to be honest. I didn't notice it this morning.
Okay, so roughly what time? What, like 2 o'clock-ish or later?
What's the time now? Yeah, maybe about 2:30. I just popped back and just I thought, hang on a minute, I saw the car was there, or parked there. It's almost a bit weird.
Okay, it's your car, is that right?
Yeah. It's a Ford Ranger.
And the colour?
Black.
And have you been victim to a similar crime in the past 12 months? Has your car been taken before?
I had a chipper stolen not long ago as well. A chipper, like it was a building tool.
Did you report that?
Yes, I have reported that, yes.
Okay. Is there anything that's at your home that, has been left behind by someone, any signs of forced entry footprints, anything like that?
No forced entry. What do you mean by left behind? Just anything?
So sometimes when people gain access to someone's home, they might leave behind items, chores that they may have used to get in, or...
No, there's nothing there.
Rose then began his mission to get enough money together to get out of the United Kingdom. Rose's girlfriend, a lady called Tara Nags, did everything she could to help Rose get away from the UK. She booked a flight abroad, and she also booked a hotel for the two of them in Birmingham so that they could lie low somewhere well away from where they were actually both based, in order, of course, to avoid the police. When the two were caught, they were only 2.5 hours away of being on a flight. William and Darren were two well-loved young men. They've got lots of family who are devastated, heartbroken, can't believe what's happened to their wonderful young men. They made victim personal statements in court, very moving, very touching. William's dad said, quote, "Today's court outcome brings a measure of justice for our son William and his friend Darren. While no sentence can ever undo the devastation of losing him, we take some comfort in knowing that those responsible have been held accountable. William was not just a victim of a senseless crime. He was our beloved son, a brother and a friend to many. His life was filled with promise, and his loss has left a gap that will never be filled. William had a kind heart, a bright smile, and a love for life that touched everyone who knew him. We will remember him for his laughter, his loyalty, and the joy that he brought into our lives." Unquote. Darren's mother likewise paid tribute to her son. Quote, Darren should still be with us, but he's not. A guilty verdict doesn't change the past. Justice being served doesn't heal the loss of our son. Darren was always coming and going. He couldn't sit still. He would arrive at home with friends, repair cars with his dad, then he would be off and then he'd be back again. The coming and goings have stopped. The repairs of the cars have stopped. The buzz of a busy home has stopped. Unquote. The two murderers, mind themselves, were quite young. Alex Rose was 29 and Charles Pardoe was 24. Tara Nag, Rosie's girlfriend, was also 24. As for their sentences, for the offence of assisting an offender, Tara got 3 years and she has to do at least 1 year and 2 months before she can be released on licence. Alex Rose has to do a 34-year minimum term of a life sentence for double murder, and his 21 months for perverting the course of justice with that phone call to the police that he made saying that his pickup truck had been stolen is going to be served concurrently with the 34 years. For, again, double murder, Charles Pardoe got life with a minimum term of 29 years. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.